Coming too close, you're too close to me.
Coming up, from the world's tallest peaks to far below the waves, plastics can be found everywhere.
Every rainy season in Bali, this is what happens.
But momentum for a global treaty to tackle the issue is gaining ground.
Do you think there is enough global support across the board for a treaty?
We're seeing it growing. It is extremely encouraging.
We do our own survey in Istanbul, Turkey, a country known for its zero waste program.
Let's see if people can live without plastic.
Millions of people visit each year, many with opposing perspectives.
Would you ever consider stop using it entirely?
Yeah, I think we need to protect the earth.
I like plastic, personally, I do.
Just 2 degrees is on. Now,
Almost over 1 million sea turtles die because of plastic use. Would you then change your mind?
No, because that's the human's fault.
Interesting.
plastics, they're everywhere. In our food, water, even our blood. It's most obvious, of course, when it washes up on our shores. The beaches on the Indonesian island of Bali, for example, have been seeing a lot of plastic pollution, much more than ever before, and way too much for locals to handle. That's left tourists upset and Bali's economy in danger of losing the visitors its economy depends on. Garbage choking the coastline can take hours or days for officials to clean. Some say it's a waste management failure. Others say the ban on single-use plastic is not being enforced. Either way, the world's 4th most populated country and one of the world's biggest plastic polluters has a serious problem on its hands.
I came here because I heard that it was a very nice place to visit and to live in. And what I see, it's all this plastic. It's impossible to take a bath, to swim. And I think the fish will not be very good as I expected. It's a real disaster for me. I used to pick up some plastic, some paper when I walk. But here it's impossible. It's an impossible mission for me. I think I will never come back.
Ketika kita udah tahu ada sampah di sini banyak, paling nanti yang kita bisa minta perbantuan itu adalah dari pemerintah. Karena mereka punya alat berat. Sedangkan kita yang hanya pakai 2 tangan ini nggak akan cukup bisa bersihin ketika kita tahu sampah itu datang malam misalnya pagi, pasti kita udah langsung atensi ini.
You know, every rainy season in Bali, this is what happens. Year by year, it's been getting progressively worse. All of this comes from somewhere where there is no waste management. You know, East Java, Central Java, Java in general has the world's biggest population island. 150 million people live on Java and has 90 of the world's most polluted rivers. And so it all starts by managing our waste at home and actually having proper infrastructure to ensure that none of it will go into nature. So, you know, every year it's, I think, a slap in the face for Bali, for Indonesia. This is a true proof that the government is really not doing enough.
The plastic pollution affects everything from marine life to people's health. Each year, a staggering 380 million metric tons of it is produced, with most of it ending up in landfills or oceans or discarded in nature. Some estimates find the ocean floor has around 100 times the amount of plastic than on its surface. 175 countries in 2022 endorsed a global treaty to tackle the issue, but issues remain unresolved.
I see no objections. It is so decided.
Kenya, 2022, and a potential turning point for planet Earth. A resolution to tackle a crisis like no other, plastic pollution. Millions of tons of plastic end up in landfills, but they also pollute rivers and oceans, killing 100 million sea creatures every year. 175 nations endorsed the first ever treaty to put an end to plastic pollution and to reach a legally binding agreement by the end of 2024. If agreed, the treaty would not only target the likes of bottles and straws, the microplastics in the air, soil, and food, but also the impact it has on public health. But the idea to reduce plastic waste isn't novel.
To protect man and his habitat from further degradation.
The first environment conference in Stockholm in 1972 demanded an international mechanism to rein in plastic production. But its impact was limited, and since the 1950s, 9.1 billion tons of it has been produced. Fast forward to today, it's difficult to know whether polluting industries would abide by an international treaty. Experts point to the pervasive relationship between oil, gas, and plastics. New projects by ExxonMobil and Shell could see a 40% increase in plastic production just in the next decade.
The reality is that we've only recycled about 9% of the plastic that's ever been produced. We cannot recycle our way out of this problem. And so what Greenpeace is calling for is cutting plastic production and accelerating a reuse-based economy. We expect the negotiations to finance, create standards, and accelerate reuse at a global scale. We are not where we need to be. We are talking in circles and pandering to a few countries that are not negotiating in good faith, and all the while the fossil fuel industry is expanding plastic production at the expense of our climate, biodiversity, and human health.
Oil and petrochemical exporters like Saudi Arabia and Russia say with under 10% of plastic waste being recycled each year, a global deal should instead focus on the need to reuse plastic. But Canada, Kenya, and the EU, along with environmental campaigners, argue production should be massively scaled down instead.
What our research shows is that plastics are affecting the planet in a way that they're destabilizing the function of this planet that we live on in a way that makes it less safe for us, and it makes it less predictable, and it makes it more dangerous for us to live here and less sustainable for us to live on the planet. So that work is showing that plastics are connected to climate change, to biodiversity loss, and to other major threats and crises that we as a human population are facing on the planet.
As the arguments continue over recycling or reducing its production, the UN warns there'll be more plastic in the ocean than fish if we don't act quickly.
Eirik Lindebjerg is the global plastics policy lead at the World Wildlife Fund. He's been following the negotiations of the Global Plastic Treaty since it began in 2022.
A global plastics treaty is really needed to harmonize all these efforts and make the efforts to stop plastic pollution binding for all countries and entire global industries. A bit of the problem with the measures that we've seen to date is that they are fragmented, only based on certain national circumstances. Not many of them are voluntary, and they're not creating that common global regulatory system that we need to tackle plastic pollution. This puts burdens on national governments. It puts burdens on individual companies having to deal with different legislations in different countries, and therefore it's to date not been the most effective way of dealing with the problem. And there really the treaty can make a huge difference.
According to recent polls, as many as 8 out of 10 people are in favor of a plastics treaty, but the majority who support it live in high polluted areas like South Africa, the African continent, and Latin America, according to the WWF. Do you think there is enough global support across the board for a treaty?
I think so, and I think we're seeing it growing. It is extremely encouraging to see all the public support. Citizens of the world are actually really caring about this issue, and they are demanding then world leaders to take action. We see majority support for measures in the treaty, such as bans on the most high-risk, avoidable, problematic plastic products, such as bans of problematic chemicals in products and product design requirements for all plastics. There is majority support for all of those in all countries, and the support is not only a majority. In many countries, it's as much as 9 out of 10 people are asking for these very specific global measures. We also see that to a certain extent being reflected in the negotiations themselves. There's a clear majority of countries coming from all regions of the world that are proposing and asking for these measures to be part of the treaty. And we're now entering a really exciting final year of the negotiations, where we'll see if this large majority of both then governments and citizens of the world will then be successful in making this a new global regulatory framework.
Can we live without plastic, Eirik?
We probably can't, at least in the short term, not live entirely without plastics. And And the treaty and different organizations engaged in the treaty are not proposing to remove plastics entirely. But what we really need to change is the way we use plastics. Today, 60% of total plastic production is being used for single-use purposes. So very short-lived, and then it becomes rubbish and it becomes pollution. So that needs to change. So we need to move away from the specific types of plastics use, short-lived single-use that is causing large pollution problems, and we need to move to a system that is more based on reuse, that is based on different business models, reduce in plastic production and consumption, and in some instances where it's environmentally friendly, also other types of materials.
And I remember back in the 90s, or it could have been the late 80s, there was this TV commercial that was saying that plastics make it possible. But since then, plastics has become a multi-trillion-dollar industry. And as such, I'm guessing it's not going to sit idly by while we try to suppress it with the Global Plastics Treaty. Is this a winnable war, or is the plastics industry too powerful and hence will not sit by as we suppress it with a treaty, you think?
I think we see a large part of the plastics life cycle, and the industries, the businesses engaged in the plastics life cycle are actually demanding more regulation. They say that business need global rules in order to be part of the transition needed. So it's a major shift. Around 200 companies are explicitly calling for this, all of the big global brands, etc. So it is a shift, I think, in large part of the industry, a recognition that we really need to do something. And of course, then combined with that public support, the strong evidence from science, I think that is what is needed in order to win this battle. On the other hand, of course, there are also interests protecting status quo and protecting sort of yesterday's thinking on plastic production and single-use plastics. But I think that the transition is inevitable, and we need to do it at the global scale, and we need to do it in a fair, global, common way if we have to succeed.
What do you think individuals can do? I remember recycling was once touted as part of the solution, but the percentage of plastics being recycled is in the single digits. I think like 9% now, with 72% of plastic waste making it into landfills or into our oceans. Should we stop caring about disposing of plastic cups and bags? I mean, why do you think we recycle so little?
I think on the one hand, I think many consumers and citizens are a bit tired of being blamed for being the reason for the problem. I think that consumers are also tired of, coming home from the supermarket, and no matter you went there to buy vegetables and groceries, and you end up filling your home with plastics that you didn't really want. So it's hard with the system that is today. It's really hard to be a conscious consumer and to reduce your own plastics use. So demanding change from both industry and governments is, of course, central, and we encourage citizens to voice their concerns. On the other hand, of course, individuals should care. We should do what we can to choose the alternative that uses less plastics, and of course, never dispose plastics into nature. Even if recycling has a lot of flaws, we should return plastics to the designated areas for that, and then work for improving the entire system.
Well, no nation does plastic quite like the United States. Americans consumed 220 kilos of plastic per person in 2019. That's around 5 times more than the global average. The Biden administration's approach to the problem focuses on a few things: reducing pollution during plastic production, improving waste management, trash cleanup, and preventing trash and micro-nanoplastics from entering waterways. But there's a lot more to the life cycle of plastic. The organization Story of Stuff project sums up the dangers quite well.
You've probably heard about a giant trash island in the ocean. Or that poor sea turtle and the straw. Maybe you've even heard how plastic is being found inside the fish we eat. The plastic crisis gets a lot of attention, but the headlines usually focus on the plastic that ends up in the environment. And that's just part of the story. The truth is, plastic has a whole life cycle that's hidden from view, one that harms people and the planet from start to finish. Let's start at the beginning. Plastic is made from fossil fuels like oil or fracked natural gas. Extracting those fossil fuels and turning them into plastics creates a lot of pollution. Pollution that most often affects marginalized communities nearby. As we've gotten better about using less oil and gas to power our lives, the fossil fuel industry found a lifeline in plastics. In fact, oil and gas companies are doubling down on plastic production, with plans to build or expand over 300 petrochemical plants in the US alone by 2025. But these companies already produce more plastic than we can use. So where's all that plastic going? A lot of it's flowing into new markets, in places like Asia, Africa, and Latin America. Because more than any other product category, plastic isn't driven by the demand for it, but by the supply. Corporations like Unilever, Nestle, and Procter & Gamble are aggressively marketing single-use plastic products around the world. These companies go to places like Indonesia, where I live, and push their products onto communities that just aren't prepared to deal with all that plastic. Maybe they're used to using natural packaging. Maybe they live on a tiny island without a system of waste collection. And on top of that, countries in the global north are shipping their own plastic waste into these countries too. When you add that all up, it's no wonder so much of this plastic ends up in the environment. And globally, that's where a whopping 32% of plastic packaging ends up. 40% goes to a landfill, where plastic just piles up for future generations to deal with.
Istanbul, as a city alone, is larger than 22 European countries and saw a whopping 20 million visitors in 2023, making it the most visited city in the world last year. With so many visitors from every corner of the planet, Just 2 Degrees correspondents Sarah Bolter and Mikhail Malik went out to ask people if they could imagine a world without plastic.
Hi, Reagan. We're on Istanbul's world-famous Istiklal Avenue, where hundreds of thousands of people from all over the planet come to visit every single day.
Yeah, and with so many nationalities frequenting these picturesque side streets and Turkish cafes, it's easy to see why this place is a microcosm of the wider world.
I love Turkish cafes, and we're gonna get some coffee in a little bit. But first, let's see if people can live without plastic.
Let's go.
Şimdi plastik üzerine her şey yapılabiliyor. Her şey kullanılabiliyor. Efendim lazerlerle kesiliyor. İstediğim formatta çıkartabiliyor. Benim için çok güzel plastik.
Would you be willing to stop using plastic? I'm talking about cups, forks, plastic bags in your everyday use. Would you be willing to just stop?
Well, I think, of course, it will be great, but now I'm not sure that it is possible.
Biz de evde zaten Almanya'da zaten yapıyoruz. Plastik şeylerden çok şey almıyoruz. Sade plastik olan malzemeler alıyoruz. Yani bilmiyorum. Türkiye dün uçtum da burayı tam bilmiyorum. İstanbul'u zaten hiç bilmiyorum. Yani buraya bakarsan yollara bakarsan gençlere hepsi çöpe yere atıyorlar. Yani dünya bir kere var değil mi?
If there were easy alternatives readily available, yeah.
What I'm gathering from what you're saying is that you think it's a difficult choice.
It's not the most pragmatic choice every time. Like, for example, I'm on holiday and I didn't bring a keep cup with me, so I have to buy a single-use plastic cup, you know.
You know, it's too hard because everything we use is made from plastic, so it's so hard, but I, of course, want to stop using plastics because it's harming our environment, and I love the world I'm living in,
need to protect the earth, and I think it will be good if all of us stop to using plastic. In Georgia, there are many campaigns about it. Marketing teams work about this issue. So step by step, we try to change people's mindset, and I hope that everyone will reach this idea.
Do you support, for instance, a global ban on plastic, like a treaty almost that all countries would agree with?
Not at all. Not at all.
I don't know if I would consider do a ban, but I would just say I think if companies are the ones to cut down, then they're not distributing as much, because we don't really we're not really the ones to buy a lot of plastic stuff, but if they change how they sell things, then we wouldn't have as much.
If a product was a little bit more expensive, but you knew that it was not made from plastic, would you still buy it?
Of course, of course.
All industry all over the world should be changed drastically.
Yeah, I would be more inclined to buy it if it was only a little bit more expensive, to be honest, yeah.
I feel like I would do something that's reusable, that I can use over again and just purchase it one time.
I agree. I don't want to spend more money.
Yes, because it's better for our environment.
It is sad to see how we negative affect nature with plastic, and that is real. That's a reality. It is not just fear mongering. It is reality.
Sweden is aiming to address rising concerns that its plastic recycling goals are lagging behind. The Nordic nation wants to recycle at least 50% of all used plastic packaging by next year. A new EU directive requiring new packaging be partially recycled will create some demand for recycled material. And its own plastic industry has opened up a non-profit, Sweden Plastic Recycling, with recycling facility owners described as the largest and most technologically advanced in the world. It'll have the capacity to process most of Sweden's used plastic.
We are at the heart of this unique facility, and what makes it special is the ability to efficiently sort out 12 different plastic types. And the size is also quite unique, with a capacity of 200,000 tons per year. We use infrared light, we use laser, we use camera technology with artificial intelligence. And those systems are all connected and digitalized. This makes this plant quite unique and extremely efficient. See, this infrared light looks like sunshine that detects the plastic type, and when we identify the right type, it will blow this particular type to a certain direction, and the rest continues to be further sorted.
The Swedes are good at recycling in general metals, paper and glass, because we've been doing this for a long time and have an industry wanting the paper, for example. Then when it comes to plastics, we are not so good. We are burning more than we recycle, basically. A lot is not even sorted out, which is a big problem, and we're trying to work on that. And this goes for both households and businesses. So we really need to work with sorting. I think that maybe we as policymakers also should try to come up with some way of helping them to get a more stable market. So, for example, one thing to do that is to put demands on recycled content into products, because then they would have to sell it anyway.
Oui, on a le sentiment que ce discours-là d'une amélioration des performances techniques, il vient plutôt appuyer un discours qui consiste à dire on peut continuer tel quel et il n'y a pas de souci. Ces plastiques-là, l'enjeu, c'est pas de mieux les trier pour mieux les recycler, ni même d'avoir une valeur économique à la matière. L'enjeu, c'est de les remplacer, de les supprimer. Donc on voit bien qu'il ne faut pas inverser en fait le propos. L'outil en lui-même, il est intéressant, mais il est intéressant s'il est au service d'une démarche globale et collective de la société pour réduire, et puis derrière, mieux trier, mieux recycler ce qu'on aura réduit.
And that's the show, but before I leave you, here's a river that's more garbage and sewage than water. Guatemala's Las Vacas River is only around 40% H2O, according to data from a local hydroelectric office. Heaps of rubbish have clogged the river, preventing the flow of water and aquatic life. A local who searches for precious metals among the toxic trash says he now has skin and respiratory issues from prolonged contact with the filthy water. environmental activist group, the Ocean Cleanup, reports that 2% of all the plastic pollution in the ocean comes from Guatemala via the Las Vacas and Montagua rivers.